Have you ever smiled and said, "Sure, I'd love to," while your body screamed, "I can't take one more thing"? What if I told you that being too nice might actually be a way of abandoning yourself? Now, I'm guilty of being too nice. I spent most of my life doing just that and can catch myself doing that now. Just the other day, I kept saying yes when I was feeling pretty darn drained. There was a bunch of construction going on at my house where it was chaotic and I had to make some important decisions that I really hadn't had to make by myself before. My husband had had a health issue earlier that morning. I had 2 client calls that were really challenging and went longer than normal. And then a friend wanted to talk through an issue she was having. And of course, I said yes. Have you ever done that? Even though you can feel that your body is pretty much done, you say yes because that's what a friend does, right? Well, maybe not. Welcome to the Forgive Yourself podcast. I'm your guide, Brenda Reese. And today we're talking about that blurred line between kindness and self-sacrifice. Why so many high-achieving women stay in nice girl mode, and how you can reclaim your voice without losing your heart. So let's chat about the hidden cost of being nice. Earlier, I mentioned abandoning yourself. What is self-abandonment? Well, self-abandonment is when you dismiss your own needs, emotions, or truth in order to avoid discomfort, yours or someone else's. It's that internal shh that says, "Don't rock the boat." Or like I grew up with, "Don't cause waves." And what is emotional neglect of ourselves? Now, you may be nurturing everyone else, but if your own well-being is always last, you become the caretaker of others at the cost of yourself. And that's emotional neglect. Now, I don't want there to be any confusion with taking care of young ones or loved ones with medical needs, because there is some emotional neglect that does happen when we raise our children or are taking care of aging parents or people in our lives with different needs. Yet, there are steps we can take to help ourselves not get burnt out, overwhelmed, and ultimately resentful. A client of mine that we'll call Beth said yes to leading several volunteer committees at work while managing a full-time job and her aging parents. She felt guilty saying no, yet she was experiencing deep exhaustion. Have you felt that? I have. One of the first things we addressed was boundaries, both inner and outer. And after practicing boundaries, she realized it wasn't about being unkind when she said no. It was about staying whole so she could show up more as herself in the activities that she chose to participate in based on her values, and not because she was trying to prove her worth. That was a huge discovery for her, that she was overcommitting because she wanted to be liked. Here's what Beth said. For years, I believed saying yes made me more lovable, but I was exhausted. Eventually, I learned that love that demands emotional neglect isn't love. It's obligation. Whew. That one's powerful. So a good visual would be, imagine watering everyone else's garden with your one little pitcher of water. At some point in time, you're pouring from an empty vessel. That's not kindness. That's depletion. So where does this pattern come from? As most of us know, especially if we've been into personal development, there is childhood programming, whether we like it or not. So, for instance, were you rewarded for being an easy child? Were you praised for not making a fuss? Maybe you learned that love is earned by being agreeable. Some examples could be girls being praised for being quiet and helpful, or maybe you received punishment or people withdrew from you when you were asserting your own needs. Or maybe you had role models who modeled martyrdom as love. I did. Martyrdom can be described as a pattern where an individual habitually prioritizes the needs of others above their own, often to the detriment of their own well-being. This behavior can stem from various underlying psychological factors such as low self-esteem, codependency, or a need for validation through self-sacrifice. Ouch. That was me. That was me. So, let me tell you about another client I had, and we're going to call her Linda. She grew up in a home where her mother taught her that good girls don't say no. Anybody relate? She entered adulthood terrified. I mean, terrified of conflict, and equated boundaries with being mean. Any of you think boundaries are being mean? Yeah, I get that too. Took me a while to even learn about boundaries. So Linda became a self-professed people pleaser because she didn't know her own needs or wants. She knew everyone else's though. In fact, she prided herself in feeling like she knew them better than they knew themselves. Anybody ever say that? I did. Oh my God. She did not know where she as a person stopped and someone else began. It was so enmeshed. Now, Linda learned through our work together to claim what those needs and wants were for herself. She learned she didn't have to use the people-pleasing skill as a coping mechanism any longer. She was excited to be able to take care of herself now. Let me back up a little bit. For those that aren't familiar with people-pleasing, you can think of it as a subconscious survival strategy to gain approval, avoid rejection, and to stay so-called safe. Now, here are some signs that you're abandoning yourself. Saying yes when every cell in your being wants to say no. You're tired. Your body is feeling that tense, frustrated feeling, and you really want to relax, yet you think, oh, sure, I can do that. Or, oh, just let me do these 2 more things. And your body is going, no, but you do it anyway. Another sign is feeling guilty for resting. Another sign is avoiding conflict, even when something or someone hurt you. Another sign is resenting others, but you blame yourself. And another sign could be feeling overly responsible for other people's happiness. Woo, doggy. All right. That one's a big one. Overly responsible for other people's happiness. So if you recognize these patterns, I want you to know you're not broken. You're just using outdated strategies that once kept you safe. Yet now, they are costing you your inner peace. But I want you to pat yourself on the back, really, seriously, for recognizing this as a pattern. Because patterns can be changed. So let's take a minute and let's redefine kindness through boundaries. Okay, let's start with what is a boundary. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about keeping yourself in your own integrity. It's about asking yourself, what do I have the capacity for right now? And another thing is we can reframe nice or kindness because real kindness includes you. If it excludes your needs, it's not being nice and it's not kindness. That's performance. Let me repeat that. Real kindness includes you. If it excludes your needs, it's not being nice and it's not kindness. It's performance. So here are a couple boundary scripts that might be helpful to say when you feel full, like you're at capacity, like my head hurts, I'm full. We do know this feeling of full. Okay, so here are a couple boundary scripts. That doesn't work for me, but thank you for thinking of me. Another one is, I need time to process this before responding. Let me get back to you in, say, 24, 48 hours or 36, whatever time frame feels good to you, not being pressured into it. If they pressure, like when I feel pressured into something, I tell them, no, I'm not going to do it. So if you want me to think about this, give me some time to process. That took me a while to get there, but that's what I'm able to do now. And a third one is, I'd love to help, yet I'm at capacity right now, so not able to. I know. It's okay. Take a breath. Okay. For those of us that haven't practiced this, you were probably feeling that tightness in your chest and you caught your breath, right? Now we just need to be willing to practice. Just willing to be willing. That's all I'm asking. Now, swinging back to the two clients I talked about earlier, it was super uncomfortable for both Beth and Linda when they started practicing taking care of their own well-being instead of putting others before themselves all the time. Because in reality, sometimes somebody else has to be put before us. But I'm talking about trying to find some harmony here, some equilibrium. But you know what they both found? They were both shocked at how no one got mad at them when they stood up for themselves. Beth said no to the volunteer committee so she could focus on resting and putting her efforts more into her own well-being and her parents. Linda added an exercise and yoga, which she had been wanting to do, yet was too busy taking care of her friends that always, quote unquote, needed her. But what they both realized was that their fear of being rejected or unloved was bigger than the actual reality of saying no and taking care of themselves. In fact, they were so pleasantly surprised to feel more connected to themselves than they ever had. They did not know that they could actually start to really appreciate and even love themselves. Why don't we think of boundaries like a fence around a garden? It's not to keep everyone out, but it's to protect what's blooming. Now, here are 5 things that you can do to reclaim your boundaries. We have this in a worksheet for you, yet I want to go through them so you could think about it. Number 1, check in with yourself first. Okay. Before saying yes, pause. We've talked about this in other podcasts. Pause, and you can do that. Let's take a breath. And then ask your body, not just your calendar. Okay. So before saying yes, pause and breathe. Ask your body, not just your calendar. Do we have the capacity for this? Before agreeing to anything, ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Is it aligned with my energy and values? Okay. And then now here's a reflection prompt. What does my body say when I think about saying yes to this request? It'll tell you. You will notice tension. You will notice it tighten up. The more you practice, this is practice. This is a practice because a lot of us aren't used to even referring to our body, right? We think all the time. So this is a good practice to pause, breathe, and just notice where you feel any tension. Okay. Number 2 is use simple, direct language. In this case, we're going to practice short, clear responses like, no, thank you, or that doesn't work for me. Okay. Those are direct. And I've learned to do that, but it took a while. And if you aren't, I'm just kind of laughing because at first I was like, oh God, no, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't do that. So if you're feeling that, if you're not quite ready for those direct responses like those, you can use the responses like I mentioned earlier. That doesn't work for me, but thank you for thinking of me. I need time to process this before responding. Let me get back to you in 24 or 48 hours using whatever time frame works for you and not them. Or I'd love to help, yet I'm at capacity right now. Okay. Now remember, take a breath. We're only practicing. Okay. And I want to note here, this is a good practice when we're being simple and direct. It's a good practice to not over explain. We're keeping it simple. We are so conditioned to explain ourselves to prove why we need to take care of ourselves. And most of the time we feel it's not even good enough unless we are sick or we are injured. This is really sad. I know I did. As women, I know we do this a lot. And as you've heard quite a few women say, do you ever hear a man explaining himself? Now, some men might, depending upon their conditioning, like I've been talking about. Yet most of the time, though, they aren't conditioned in the same way as women for whatever reason in our society. So in this case, use simple, direct language, the reflection prompt is, what simple phrase can I practice saying today? I do understand this is really challenging at first. Trust me, I do understand. Yet, you will feel so much liberation the more you practice. Now, number 3 is expect discomfort at first. Growth rarely feels graceful at first, right? It feels shaky, and that's okay. It's just like when we go to the gym, we are sore, we hurt. Any kind of growth usually doesn't feel very graceful at first. Let's recognize that feeling uneasy is normal when setting new boundaries. It's a sign of growth, not failure. Okay. Now, the reflection prompt for this one is, when have I felt uncomfortable but followed through anyway? How did that feel? Number 4, start small. Begin with some, we'll call them lower stakes scenarios by setting a micro boundary, like declining a minor request or speaking up in a safe environment. Or maybe asking for alone time. That's a really good place to start. I had to do this the other day. On top of all that construction and challenging clients, I also had a house guest that wanted to spend time together. And, after saying yes to the friend when I wanted to say no, I had to say no. I finally, it's unfortunate. I just got to my overly full point and I had to say no, not tonight. I need some downtime. And you know what? She said, I am so proud of you. I'm so glad you said that. So a lot of times our fear of rejection can play out way bigger in our head than actual real life. So the reflection prompt for this step is, what small boundary can I set this week? What can I practice? And number 5 is celebrate the wins. Notice and acknowledge every time you honor your truth. It builds confidence and it rewires your nervous system. Because each time you choose you rewire the belief that your worth is earned through sacrifice. Ugh. Wow. When we think of it like that, my belief, that I could be running around with a belief that my worth is earned through sacrifice. Maybe my belief, my worth, is about love. So the reflection prompt I would like you to use for step number 5 is, how will I celebrate my next boundary win? Now, we've talked about how our brains love celebration. It gives us those good chemicals that helps us to rewire our circuitry. Who doesn't like a win? Especially for ourselves, right? So maybe you can do a happy dance or take a walk outside or whatever feels good to you. But please celebrate the win. When you and I stop betraying ourselves to make others comfortable, we begin a powerful journey, one of self-loyalty and one of sovereignty and agency. And that, my friend, feels so good. That's liberating. Now, in closing, I want to remind you we've created a worksheet for you with those 5 steps and reflection prompts that you can download. The link will be in the show notes. And if you relate to being that high-achieving woman who finds that her people-pleasing tendencies is getting in the way of her work or personal relationships to where she can't show up as herself, or she feels resentful, or she's just feeling stuck, reach out. And we can have a no obligation chat to see if the coaching I provide is a good fit. And I'd love to leave you with this closing affirmation. I am no longer shrinking to be liked. I am no longer silencing my truth to stay safe. I am learning to love myself by honoring my voice. I am not just nice. I am whole. And until next time, take care, my friend. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy it, would you do me a favor and share this episode and then follow us on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss one episode of the Forgive Yourself podcast, where every Friday you will get tips, tools, and stories so that you can turn your pain into peace. Take care.